Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to Government Contracting Weekly. I'm Jim McCarthy, the owner and technical director of Key Solutions, and the host of this show. In today's program, we're going to get an analysis of our current marketplace from Roger Ervin, Sector Vice President at LMI. Roger is an expert on measuring the effectiveness of contract performance. After Roger, you'll meet Jamie Bratten, the President and CEO of GWAC, who's going to give us a good sense of what lies ahead for our industry, including specific procurements that are on the horizon for 2014. As always, there's a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. Good morning. I'm here with Roger Ervin, Vice President of International Markets for LMI. Welcome there. I'm glad to have you, man.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning.
Yeah, I think this is really going to be a nice discussion, so I really like it. I've done some research on you, and one of the things that I saw was that you had personally managed a $62 billion program. So you've done nothing big then, I take it. Then,
yeah,
huh?
no, I was just going to slacker that way.
62 billion. I don't think there's a whole lot of people that can say that they've done that, so that's good.
But it was a great experience.
Tell us about your background. Okay?
Thank you. So I'm currently, as you mentioned, Vice President for International Markets at LMI. We manage programs around the world. We've done work in about 40 countries, and I can come back to that later on. But in terms of myself, I was recruited by the CEO of LMI from the state of Wisconsin, where I served as the Secretary of Revenue for 4 years. Prior to that, I spent most of my time in either government or the private sector, and I was lucky enough to sort of have about 12 to 13 years in each market. And I've worked in the federal government. I lived in Washington for 17 years before moving to Wisconsin. And the experience in Wisconsin was a great additive to my federal experience.
Does it ever snow in Wisconsin, by the way?
Well, only about 18 inches right now, so so it gives us a chance to be very grounded in the environment in Wisconsin. Yeah. So I'm happy to be here today, and we're at 61 degrees as opposed to 16 degrees.
Yeah. Well, Roger is too humble to actually say this, but I happen to know that during your tenure, you were not only did you manage that huge budget, but you also were responsible for bringing in about $1 billion a year in additional revenue, and that revenue allowed the state to do all sorts of new programs and to stretch programs and to get into new things. So that's a pretty good accomplishment too, isn't it?
It was great. Yeah. We had a great staff. We had a staff that became aligned around continuous improvement. We became a national leader in electronic filing. We became a national leader in how to manage lotteries, a national leader in how to reprogram government services to be more citizen-centric.
Okay, so now so that's Roger. Let's talk about your company now, LMI. Tell us about that. Tell us how it got started, what it does, go ahead.
LMI is a great company. Most people don't know this, but we are still a nonprofit after 50 years. We were started by Robert McNamara in 1961 as a company that could provide business process expertise to the Department of Defense. And after leaving Ford Motor Company, he came to the Department of Defense at that time. He realized that they needed more help with efficiency and to modernize processes, and LMI was born and has continued that legacy now for 50 years. We're now in 40 agencies across government, and as I mentioned, 40 countries in terms of our work externally to the U.S. And we provide services from human capital to supply chain, which is our core business, to IT and resource management. Right. And we've got a very unique brand in the sense that we are able to compete with commercial firms and other government contracting firms, but at the same time, we maintain this nonprofit, government-centric, government service orientation, in which I think has sort of been a really interesting differentiator for us. And that really starts from the intake and personnel. We really look for that in every single person that comes to the company.
Well, thank you, Roger. I would say nonprofit is good, probably no profit is bad, but you're
Absolutely.
nonprofit, I got that. Okay. All right, thank you. Roger, you've been on both sides. You work for government, you work for industry or the private sector. I want to ask you your perspective on this, what I call sort of lost in translation. And by that I mean programs often start with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of commitment, the best vision, the best hope, and somehow, somewhere in the machinery of government, maybe in the trenches, something stops and programs stall. Have you experienced that, and what can we do about that, or what could be done about that?
Well, you know, first thing, I'm not sure it's unique to government. I think it happens in the corporate sector as well, where it's an organizational dynamic, where you can have the right vision, you can have the right objectives, but in terms of sort of implementing the program, rolling it out, managing the program, keeping people focused, having sort of incremental measurements of how a program should be operated and where you may be making mistakes and how you scale that up could sort of go awry. And so it happens more in government because I think that there sort of sometimes isn't that bottom line motivation. But the way to get it moving again, I think, is using methodologies like performance management, and to really make sure you have the right kind of people in the jobs that understand how to motivate people, measure progress, and utilize outcomes and information to redesign and refocus the vision.
Is performance management, performance measurement, is that something new, or has that been around, or are you guys in the process of perfecting it?
Yeah, it's been around for a long time, but it always needs perfection. I think the best part about the performance management methodology is it's really about continuous improvement. And continuous improvement is always, I mean, this may sound obvious to some people, but it really is about bringing in new types of ways to inculcate continuous improvement in your workforce, and to realign people, technology, infrastructure, and policies around your strategy, and to continue to look at those outcomes and those measurements to, in the next life cycle of the program, get better results.
In what ways can performance management or performance measurement sort of link programs and policies and budgets and legislation and outcomes and all that? What is the linkage that might exist between that? And it's a useful tool, I take it.
Yeah, it is. And I think that the linkage is the mindset of the workforce, the mindset of the policymakers, the mindset of the managers towards managing ahead, innovation. How do you get people to think innovatively? How do you get people to look at policies and infrastructure and say, do we really need this policy anymore? Can we merge this? Do we, when someone leaves an organization, leaves government, do we still need this position, or can we merge this position with another position, and can we get a higher level of output? But as we were talking before the show started, the thing that worked for me at Wisconsin, and the thing I think that many federal agencies really need to look at, is a refocus on the citizen. Can the programs and services that you are supposed to deliver to the citizens be delivered in a more effective and efficient way?
And I'd like to come back to that point after our break. We're going to pause now and for a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to deal with precisely that subject. Okay? Good.
Federal acquisition and program offices are working every day to defend and secure the United States. Hello, I'm Brian Null, President of Blue Water Federal Solutions. We are a growing small business possessing the experience and capabilities found in the largest federal contractors. Since 2005, we've earned a significant number of contracts and task orders across DoD, DHS, and civilian agencies, with major contracts including DHS Eagle, Eagle II, and GSA Alliance Small Business. Our success is achieved through the high-performance teams that are providing disciplined service delivery on complex technical solutions, meeting cost and schedule with exceptional customer feedback and official CPAR ratings. To learn how we can deliver exceptional results on your mission requirements, go to bluewaterfederal.com and click on Contact Us. Blue Water Federal. Solutions, integrity, results.
In this hyper-competitive marketplace, as a federal government contractor, now more than ever, you need to identify, track, forecast, and analyze opportunities that will help you grow your company by better positioning yourself to win contracts. I'm Jamie Bratten, the founder of Easy GovOps, and that's our mission. Utilizing the most intuitive market intelligence platform, Easy GovOps, enables contractors of all sizes to manage their pipeline, collaborate, and team like never before. Experience for yourself the power available to you and your team with a 5-day free trial period with no commitment necessary to begin. Simply visit easygovops.com to start your free trial today. Join the hundreds of other federal government contractors who are enjoying the ultimate competitive advantage of our unequaled market intelligence. Just spend one free week at easygovops.com and see for yourself.
I'm here with Roger Ervin, Vice President from LMI, and before we broke for commercial, you were about to talk about what I would call the future. And so what I'm going to ask you to do, if you don't mind, is gaze into your proverbial crystal ball and tell us about trends. I mean, this market has seen trends: performance-based contracting, insourcing, outsourcing, A76, Six Sigma, all these different things. In your view, what's the next big trend that we might expect?
Well, I think that number one, there are a lot of resource challenges right now, not only in the U.S. but globally. So the idea of what happens in government in this sort of new environment in which we have higher efficiency in terms of what the private sector is delivering to customers, lower resource base, and higher expectations from citizens. So I think that the next trend is going to be sort of how do you deliver good government to the citizens to meet their expectations in terms of time, cost, and impact. And so I think that the next trend is going to be a customer-centric, a customer-grounded type philosophy of delivery services. And we have this trend that's we're now experiencing where people are retiring. We had this in Wisconsin. 50%, 60% of the workforce is going to retire. So, and some of those jobs are not going to be filled. So, the idea of efficiency and service provision is going to be thrusted upon us whether we like it or not. So, the sooner we get around to that, the better. Closing the gap between where government is right now in terms of a laggard in the market to being more where the private sector is, and but at the same time having that orientation towards government service. So. The government needs to sort of figure out how they're going to do that, and one way to do that is to ensure that the contracting community is aligned with that strategy. Okay.
I want to follow up on a thread here that you said. You used the term customer-centric or customer centricity. Okay, so let's take that as maybe a key to winning. A bidder or an offeror has got to demonstrate that the company and their team is customer-centric, right? Any thoughts on how that ought to be done? What would the government be looking for? What do you tell your clients, for example, about that?
Yeah, well, number one, I think that LMI has been sort of had a counter-cyclical experience in recent years where others may find that their business is down, we're actually still growing. And I think we're growing because of our perspective on government service. Our brand is known as an organization that has real commitment to that perspective, and we demonstrate that every day. We have very close proximity to the customer. So I think the winning strategy for companies in this market is to realign yourself around good government service and to demonstrate that you're in this for the government, you're in this for the end user, the citizen.
It's about the customer, not about us.
It's about the customer, not about us.
Okay.
And not having a false perception that the customer is the government. The government's sort of the pass-through to get to the citizen. So I think showing that and showing that you're going to help government implement that is the way to win in this market.
Okay, well, thank you. So we've been here today with Roger Ervin from LMI. I want to thank you for being here today. It's our pleasure. And by the way, I hope you'll come on the show again at some point.
I would love to. Thank you very much.
Really? Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to break now for commercial, and we'll be right back.
Working in contract management is a complex job. Creating, executing, managing contracts. It's an ever-changing world, and our members share the same challenges. At the National Contract Management Association, we know this business, gathering the best minds in our field, furthering your career by providing knowledge and training. Together, we've figured it out.
So, did we win that government contract?
We did.
And?
And now we've got to deal with the regulatory hurdles.
Well, good luck with that.
When the government's your client, you need to play by their rules.
And the rules change more than you think.
Exactly. We need someone who's done this before. Plus, it's complicated, so we're going with BDO.
BDO?
People who know government contracting know BDO.
We at JRC Integrated Systems are proud of our legacy of providing systems engineering expertise to the strategic deterrence community. For more than 10 years, JRC has helped Navy strategic systems programs manage the Ohio and Ohio replacement programs. From defining requirements to developing verification plans to building and implementing the program plans to bring a major weapon system to shore-based test environment, we at JRC have become trusted advisors to ACAT-1 programs. In addition to Navy SSP, JRC Integrated Systems has begun providing similar expertise to other related programs in the Missile Defense Agency and other weapon system programs. If you need highly skilled support to help you solve your engineering and programmatic challenges, then we at JRC Integrated Systems invite you to contact us at info@jrcisi.com.
Good morning. I'm here today with Jamie Bratten, who is the president and CEO of GWAC. And by the way, I have to say, the fountain of all wisdom when it comes to opportunities. So I want to thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for that title. I appreciate it.
Okay. So the first thing, tell our audience about GWAC. You know, what is it? What does it do? What's your charter? All that kind of stuff.
Great question. We started a company about 5 years ago, and we've been live as a product for a little bit over two and a half years. We were very fortunate enough to kind of gauge the market in the early stages as to, one, to even decipher whether or not to get into the market intelligence space. You know, it's a very small niche market. There's a couple very powerful folks in this space already. Well, we saw a definitive void. Market intelligence with integration of data, making the actual data talk to present kind of a all-encompassing picture. So we wanted to kind of get into this space to really provide that for every kind of business, be it small, as a government contractor, or be a large-sized government contractor. Kind of fill the bucket, for lack of a better term, for all those type of government contracting folks. So what we wanted to do is basically build a platform that was very easy to use. That was a huge void in this particular space, to actually drive that data and be easily attainable for any skill set. You have BD folks at some of the major primes, Northrop Grumman and so forth, but you also have really, really small government contractors that have no idea how to manage that data.
Fundamentally, what need in the marketplace does GWAC meet?
Well, what we do is we didn't want to form just a niche just for small government contractors. Even though their needs are actually higher, quite frankly, than a lot of the major, primes, because of the fact that, they have really, really high skill sets of the folks that they hire, and, the methodologies are on a much higher, plane.
They have a deep bench.
Exactly. They have many more resources and so forth. The smaller folks, they wear so many different hats. So it's very difficult to create a platform that services both spectrums. So that was a unique challenge.
To integrate those two
absolutely,
needs.
to kind of create those, worlds and kind of have them collide.
Okay, so I've already labeled you as the source of all data, so now I'm going to ask for your professional judgment with respect to what I call the pipeline.
Sure.
With sequestration and fiscal cliffs and budget limitations and shutdowns, has the opportunity pipeline reopened? In other words, are there RFPs flowing in significant numbers?
I wouldn't say significant numbers per se, but I would say that in the very near horizon there will be. Usually right around, and again, data doesn't lie, especially historical data. History has a tendency to repeat itself, and whether or not you have a sequestration, time frame, or major budget concerns, in historical past. What happens is usually right around Thanksgiving, for lack of a better time frame. From that point to roughly the first week of January, no coincidence. People go on vacation, everybody's out of town. What happens is, it's compounded because what you just shared, the budget concerns. They had to wait for, obviously, Congress to get back, to actually make decisions, what was specifically going to happen, whether programs themselves were actually going to get the funding, per se. So there's a lot of wait and see activity. So usually what happens is that there's about a 60-day time frame. Basically, let's wait and see what's going to happen, whether this program is going to get the actual funding, and then the team's readiness, ability in that time frame, they decipher, pretty rapidly, whether or not this is something they want to go after.
Okay, so your prediction then, in 10 seconds or less, what's your prediction of
I would
when
say
that pipeline
March and April. March and April specifically is when it really ramps up, usually the first week of April.
Okay, so what we're saying to the audience is be patient, as you have been for some time, but maybe in March or April we'll see a uptick. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jamie Bratten, give us a preview of coming attractions. I call it the tour of the horizon. What can we expect in 2014?
Great question. I actually brought a little cheat sheet to kind of go over a couple different things. There's many GWACs are actually coming out 2014 that are extreme interest, not just regionally to government contractors, actually nationally. BITS 2 is one of them that, it's a 10-year IDIQ that basically they perceive that there is going to be an increase in 2014, so you definitely want to take advantage of that. It's basically an IT support program. There's another one called TIPS, TIPS, S-3. That's an IRS program. That's another program support entity. Again, they perceive that there's going to be an increase in budget per se for that particular program. OASIS, everybody knows about OASIS.
Right. We've talked
that's
about
probably
that.
the biggest one. There's a couple other ones. 8A Stars. That's everybody knows about 8A Stars.
So this is 8A Stars 2 kind of?
Well, it's 8A Stars 2 exactly, and they're obviously they have more funding for that. They're trying to really promote 8A entities to have the advantage, in that particular space for that particular program itself. And there's another one called CHESS that is actually a program that it's going to be, the Army spending a lot of money for IT support, and because of the concern with cybersecurity, and all that concern, whether or not, our equipment being infiltrated, in some way, shape, or form. So there's a lot of concern about upgrading all the equipment within the actual Army. So a lot of expenditures in that particular realm.
So just curious, how many opportunities do you think you're tracking at any one given time? Any feeling that?
I would say, in total records per se, we have roughly about 80 million records within our tool. It's 14 years contract data. It varies because subcontract data is a different subset. It's roughly about 5 years for that. Again, 14 years for contract data. We do a lot of different tracking solicitations. We have 10-year archivability within that particular realm too as well. It's what the government sources, quite frankly.
Okay, so you've gone through and gave us some examples, 4 or 5 examples of some big GWACs. Where does somebody go if they want to get more information about just those or the other ones? I see that you have a very good list here. So
Absolutely.
like
The best mechanism is going through a market intelligence tool, quite frankly, because they have researchers that actually will gather that information and portray it in such a way that you can, quite frankly, understand.
So if they wanted to contact you, how do they do that?
Oh, they just go to easygovops.com, our website, and obviously, through the show, we'll have little teasers as to how to be able to contact us as well.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, well, we're going to step away for just a minute for a little commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how your company helps play a role in winning some contracts, because you provide the information that is needed.
That sounds true.
AFCEA has been bringing government and industry together since 1946. By joining AFCEA, you'll reach the decision makers and become part of the discussion. You'll increase market visibility, gain market insight, receive discounts on AFCEA member services and events, and manage and engage corporate associates. AFCEA is the association of choice. Join today at www.afcea.org.
The U.S. government is the world's largest customer, buying more than $3 trillion a year in goods and services, including more than $500 billion in contracts with foreign companies. To attract more foreign interest, we have developed the Forum, which is geared to embassy representatives, trade missions, and foreign companies seeking to win U.S. federal contracts. The forum will provide a practical overview on how to effectively navigate the regulations and protocols in the federal marketplace. The forum, titled Demystifying the U.S. Government Marketplace, will be held on March 19th at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center in Washington, D.C. The speakers and panelists will include foreign trade representatives, foreign company representatives, and professionals in federal contracting. To learn more, go to aockeysolutions.com and click on KSI Buzz for events.
GWAC, you have your thumb on the pulse of the market. So what I'd like to hear from you is, from your perspective, what are some, like, one or two keys to winning government contracts? Tell us about that.
There's an old cliche, timeliness. You have to know about the opportunities up front in advance. It comes down to hard work and effort. You have to reach out to the program managers, kind of go upstream and make your relationships with those particular folks. A lot of times you have to have inside knowledge as to how to be able to reach those folks. Market intelligence tools are those means to be able to contact those folks, have the data, the wherewithal to actually find out who those program managers are at those respective agencies, and kind of build that pipeline from that aspect of it. So that's probably the biggest key, if I was going to share that with you.
Great. So I guess being out in front is important. Sure. I would say that if the agency has never heard of a company, it's unlikely that they're going to award a $100 million contract to them.
True.
Right? What about the data? What about the quality of the data? How important is that in winning, and how do you play a role in that?
Absolutely. Well, the management data is probably the best way to actually describe it, because there's so many different touch points within, recompete contracts, with obviously new solicitations that are just hitting the street, and a combination of both worlds. As a government contractor, trying to decipher as to what avenue you want to go. Go after a recompete, where you already know information about the incumbent, kind of where their vision is, and obviously where their focus has been on a particular agency, a particular program.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for being here. We're just about out of time, but I would like to shake your hand and say I hope you will be on the show again.
I welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that you took a lot away from today's program as we drilled down on both our industry's present performance and what lies ahead for the balance of this year. My thanks go out to Roger Ervin, Sector Vice President at LMI, and to Jamie Bratten, the President and CEO of GWAC, for sharing their expertise. And of course, my thanks especially to you, our viewers, for making Government Contracting Weekly a regular part of your learning regimen. On behalf of all of my colleagues at Key Solutions, I'm Jim McCarthy, and see you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.